Hello, my name is Nicole Rootselaar. I'm from the University of Lethbridge in Canada, and today I'm going to present to you Grasping Development, how right hand use relates to measures of motor, cognitive, and social development in preschool children. In our lab, we spend a great deal of time watching children build Lego models like the 4-year-old child you see here. What we notice is that she primarily uses her left hand to stabilize the model, while she does the majority of the grasping with her right hand and uses her right hand to pick up blocks and place them on the model. This is of vital interest to us because we have several publications which suggest that children who use their right hand more during tasks like this are more likely to exhibit better executive function and language skills. When I say executive function, I'm referring to a host of different abilities that enable a child to self-regulate their behavior. This includes things like their emotional regulation, their working memory, their inhibition, their ability to shift between tasks, things like that. In this chart, you see the results from one such study, which looked at right hand use for grasping and compared it to a child's executive function score as taken from a questionnaire filled out by parents. Here, the lower the score, the better a child's executive function. So these results indicate that those children who use their right hand more exhibited better executive function. We've also done a similar study comparing children's speech development to their right hand use. Here, we found that children who use their right hand more were able to better differentiate between the S and SH sound. So for example, a child with more right hand use would be able to clearly pronounce the difference between sip and ship. In another study relating closely to these ones, our lab closely connected those two previous findings by relating that ability to differentiate between the S and SH sound to the executive function score. So finally, those children who are better able to pronounce the difference between those sounds have better executive function. This really suggests that there is a deep interrelationship between these functions of right hand use, executive function, and language development. The final piece of the puzzle that we believe is missing from our lab and lacking in the literature in general is looking at social development. Social development is the final vital piece that a child needs to grow up and go off into the world as a well-adapted individual able to have a successful life. There has been research that has linked aspects of executive function to social development, but nothing that has looked comprehensively at these components such as right hand use, executive function, language, and social development all in one study. That was the main purpose of our study, with the hypothesis, of course, that we would be able to find that interrelationship between these four elements and particularly relate that right hand use to social development as we've previously related it both to executive function and language. To test this hypothesis, we've currently collected 24 children and are hoping to collect more. They range in age from 3 to 5 years old. To assess their right hand use, instead of using a Lego task, we actually looked at their right hand use while completing the PPVT, or Peabody Picture Vocabulary Test. Here, the experimenter pronounces a word and the child is asked to point to one of the four images which relate to that word. So in the case in either of the top pictures, the experimenter would pronounce the word juggler and the child would be expected to point to that image. For language, we used a measure of vocabulary instead of speech development. So from this test, we can ascertain the size of the child's vocabulary. For executive function, unlike using the brief, we used a tabletop game where the child completed a child-friendly version of Stroop. Here, they would first be shown just cards of animals like you see in the top row, so they'd be asked to name these animals. Cow, pig, sheep, very simple. Then we switch to the silly game where they're asked to name the body of the animals, as in the bottom row, where the animals have mismatched heads from their body, a slightly difficult task. So here the child would be expected to name duck, pig, and cow. Finally, for our social task, the children would be paired up with someone they had not met before and given a bucket of Lego and asked to build something together for about 5 minutes. Here, we'd score the children on how social they were during that. We broke it down and had specific criteria to score them on their affect, the interactions they made, how often they initiated conversation or some form of communication with the other child, if they planned together, and if they actually engaged while building. The first result I'd like to cover is we replicated previous finding where there is a relationship between language and executive function. Here, the larger the vocabulary size of the child, the fewer errors the children made in the animal stroop game, or the better the executive function the child had. In terms of the relationship between right hand use in these variables, the only significant relationship we found was between right hand use and social interaction. Here, the more the child used their right hand to point during the PPVT, the better social interaction score they had, or the more likely they were to engage with the other child while building Lego. We also confirmed our hypothesis that we'd see an interrelationship between social interaction and our other variables, executive function and language. Here at this chart, we're looking at the significant correlation between the number of errors and social interaction. So the fewer errors the child made, or better their executive function, the higher their social interaction score. And as I mentioned before, there is a significant relationship between the vocabulary size and social interaction. The better the child's PPVT score, the higher their social interaction score. So first I'd like to address that right hand use did only relate to social interaction. However, there was a correlation approaching significance between social interaction and executive function, and given the relatively small number of participants, I'm hoping that when we have the full data collected, we'll see that relationship materialize. It is also possible that the relationship is just weaker when asking a child to point instead of grasp, as communicative pointing, as in the PPVT task, may activate slightly different areas of the brain compared to something like grasping to construct a Lego model, and so that could be what's influencing the results we see here. Notably, all relationships were significant between measures of language, executive function, and social development, backing up previous research done in the lab and suggesting that there is this tight interrelationship between social measures and executive function, language, and even lateralized motor control. With results like these, what we'd like to see in the future is studies which look into interventions where you could do something like a right hand training program, encouraging children to use their right hand more often, and assess if there is that improvement in social abilities as well as executive function and speech abilities. Our lab is currently working with a program around Lethbridge area to see if this could be a possibility. Thank you for your time and listening to my presentation.